If you don't want to hear about Drake's misfortune, then click away now, because full fat spoilers are ahead. Yo ho ho! Right, it's late. I was meant to film this yesterday. I'm fucking tired. Let's talk about Uncharted. Was Uncharted terrible?
Don't make me do this.
A few months ago, I made a video called Uncharted Looks Terrible, in which I reviewed the very first trailer, and suffice to say, I was not impressed. To be honest, I've not been impressed since the very first casting announcement of Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. Some of the worst casting to come out of a video game adaptation I've seen in a very long time. Up there with The Rock being in, well, any video game movie. The first reveals in the trailer did not do much to dissuade me that this would be Uncharted in name only. Now that I've seen the film, I can tell you that I'm not made of stone. It was a fun movie, I had a good time, and I'm happy to announce that Uncharted is not terrible. It's just not really an Uncharted movie. It's a Tom Holland, Mark Wahlberg, sans moustache until the post-credit scene, adventure movie, which is competent, fairly well made, has some neat little action set pieces, and doesn't outstay its welcome. But as an Uncharted movie, it's just like, it's barely an adaptation of the games. Sometimes if you squint, you can kind of make out Uncharted, but more often than not, it's just a vehicle for Wahlberg and Holland to crack wise and explore what, to be fair, is quite a fun rapport. It's one of those frustrating movies because it's paced well, the action's not terrible, like the characters are fun, but I just don't understand in any way, shape or form why the current era of Hollywood had to make an adaptation of Uncharted if this is what they were going to come up with. Do we really not trust audiences anymore to just go and watch an original treasure hunter movie? What was Indiana Jones at the time? Just that, and that was huge. I was disappointed from the first trailer of Uncharted because it seems like we've not learned any of the lessons from the first video game adaptations, and it feels like we're constantly picking out the parts from video games which should not be adapted straight up. Uncharted 2022 strays so far from the source material that it might as well not be an Uncharted movie. It very much reminds me of the very first Mila Djokovic Resident Evil film in 2002. You know, it's like, in parts, it's not a bad adaptation of the Resident Evil video games. There's, you know, the Umbrella Corporation, and later in the sequels we see more of the characters from the games. But for some reason, it has its own made-up new lead character who has kind of Matrixy superpowers, and, you know, it veers off in all these different directions that are really not Resident Evil. Also, weirdly, the first Resident Evil movie, the Mila Djokovic's best friend, Matt, gets taken by the enemy. She thinks he's dead. A new villain comes into the picture in the second film who is unstoppable, a Terminator-like figure, and then it is revealed in the third act that this is actually Mila Djokovic's old friend Matt from the first movie, who has been experimented on by Hydra, Umbrella. Seriously, it's a little bit weird that came out, and then the Winter Soldier comic came out a year later. It's one of those weird pop culture coincidences, like I Am the Doctor by Murray Gold being so similar to Suicide Mission from Mass Effect 2, and they came out so close together. Or maybe Brew Baker and Paul W.S. Anderson were both inspired by the same thing that predates both of these characters. Who knows?
Oh, crap!
Before I continue to chart this review, I want to briefly talk about this week's sponsor, Fabulous! I procrastinate. a whole lot, especially ever since I went full-time with YouTube. It's great to allow yourself time to be unproductive so that you can be sufficiently creative, but if you're like me and you want to squeeze a little bit more out of your day, then Fabulous would be a perfect fit. This award-winning app helps create long-lasting change in your daily routine. What's special about Fabulous is it strikes a balance between big and small goals to help make everything feel manageable. I want to get more out of my mornings, but Fabulous just wants me to drink water 3 times this week when I first get up. It's a tiny, easy to accomplish task, which would put me into better habits as I start to think about more ways I can optimise my wake up, like adding in some yoga or meditation. The journey will continue to guide you to prepare a great breakfast, listing the step-by-step process to aim for your goal by buying fruit, eggs, etc. It then provides some healthy recipes to try. Fabulous has you covered for everything. I've added the task of doing a bit of cleaning in the morning because I find it centres my brain for the work tasks ahead. You can pick among more than 100 recommended habits or create your own. The number of habits per routine is limited for free users, but unlimited for premium. Getting a premium Fabulous membership also allows you to restore and back up your journey progress and get you access to all content on there, such as integrated workouts and sleep coaching. Unlike other self-development apps, Fabulous is gentler, more rewarding, fun, and has a more supportive approach. It will send you reminders if you want, or you can build out different morning to night routines that feel tailored to you. I've been using it for about a week and I've actually found it's been really good at getting me up and making me more productive in the mornings. Start building your daily routine. The first 100 people who click on the link will get 25% off a Fabulous subscription. I have nothing to gain by giving this movie a shitty review just because my previous video was called Uncharted Looks Terrible. I don't want to do that. I want to give you the fair breakdown and admit to you that, I had fun with it. I'm not saying it's a 2-star picture. It's just not by any stretch of the imagination a great movie, nor is it a faithful movie to the games. When I saw Nolan North pop up for his cameo, not only did it immensely pull me out of the movie because it's really weirdly meta in a movie that is not meta. Nolan North sort of like references the events of Uncharted 3 and he's like, I got to do the thing you just did. But it just made me desperately want to hear Nolan North's sweet tones as Nathan Drake. It made me think about the games, it made me want to play them. And I don't really speak about it a lot on the channel, so you might not be aware, but I was a massive Uncharted fan back in the day. It was one of the first games I got on my PlayStation 3 and it honestly blew my socks off. I could not believe what I was playing as a kid, and it was so refreshing to, we'd seen games be like story driven before and we'd already gotten to the stage in video games where we had like memorable characters, but I just think Nathan Drake was such a unique venture. It was so strange to see like a true video game everyman, a guy that says oh crap and panics and worries when he's taking on the bad guys, a guy that leaps to grab a ledge and just about manages by the skin of his teeth. And having that discourse between the player and Nate throughout the whole experience just made you feel so irrevocably tied to him. And it was at a time when the plague of this silent protagonist bullshit was everywhere. And I just never got that. Even as a kid, I was like, I don't feel any more immersed because my player is not speaking. Like, I don't feel like I'm in the game, I'm the person. I always found it so stupid. It's like, I want to play as a character and I want to feel and empathise with that character's plight. And I just thought, you look at someone like Nathan Drake and it's 10 times more effective than any of the silent protagonists from that era. And Uncharted in many ways was the pioneer of what we know to be the modern action game. Like Jedi Fallen Order, as much as it pulls from Dark Souls, it would be nothing without Uncharted. And I just think, what if we can have, if Uncharted the games can be the pioneer for the modern action game, then why can't Uncharted the movie do the same for movie making? Why can't it be the pioneer of the next phase of action movie? And you might be sitting there going, oh, you're expecting too much. It's like, bullshit, I'm expecting too much. I'm fed up of like mediocrity in movies. This movie could have been great, All the ingredients are there in the original games, and I don't think it would even take that much work to really adapt them. If you're an Uncharted fan and you want to enjoy this movie in any way, shape or form, you need to move past the casting. And I understand that is a tough pill to swallow. I also understand that if you're not willing to move past that, that's absolutely understandable. And I also need to point out, like, I've got nothing against Tom Holland or Mark Wahlberg. A couple of people, I guess Tom Holland stans in the comments of my last video, thought I was being a bit mean to him. But really, I was just sort of trying to clarify that. But really, all I was saying is that I just don't think he's right for Nathan Drake. And to be honest, in general, I don't think he's right for action movies. I know it might seem counterintuitive considering he was just in an action movie that made $1 billion, but none of the Spider-Man actors are really action stars. That's not why the casting of those characters, of Tobey Maguire, of Andrew Garfield, of Tom Holland works with the casting of Spider-Man. For Spider-Man, you should cast a rom-com lead. You should cast a dork, not an action star. That is the whole point, is that, you know, you have the Peter Parker, the mild-mannered alter ego, and he becomes Spider-Man. So I don't think there's any need for Tom Holland to be in these big-budget action movies outside of that. I think he really needs to have a sit-down with his agent, because he's made so many strange choices. And I think he's going out of his way to try and make people not see him as that 17-year-old kid that he plays in Spider-Man. But I don't think the way to do that is to have him like strutting around in leather jackets, being hyper serious, like pretending to be Nathan Drake. I think you should do what Andrew Garfield did. You know, like he's in an immense wealth of great movies that push him emotionally, that send him off in all these different like skins. He's an absolute chameleon, Andrew Garfield. And, you know, like years later on from those Spider-Man movies, I've never once thought, gee, Andrew Garfield would be great in an action movie. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, he's not that kind of actor. And neither is Tom Holland. You know, like, I think doing something like Cherry is probably, you know, the right idea, as much of that as a misfire. Or the devil all the time. But I just don't think he constantly plays roles which I think accentuate the sort of Peter Pan-edness of his whole visage rather than hiding it. And I just think you should lean into it, you know, like play a young 20-something until you age up, or you know, just grow a fucking beard, man. That's what I did. Come on, like a baby without this thing. In terms of Mark Wahlberg as Sully, he's playing Mark Wahlberg, but as I said before, his rapport with Tom Holland is nice. I like the sort of budding friendship they have, but also, you know, it's not all sunshine and roses. They have some trust issues, and that comes to play a couple of times in some neat ways. It really does kind of feel like the lack of trust is something that Nate and Sully would have had in their first couple of adventures in the canon of the games. So I feel like that kind of translates nicely, but it's just weird that they sort of go out of their way to make him Mark Wahlberg rather than just biting the bullet and making him Sully. I think the movie would have felt goofy in a nice way if he'd have just had that thick Tom Selleck stash like Sully is supposed to, and he just kept it the whole movie. And I don't even think like you need to reference it as being like out of fashion or not very modern for 2022. Like I'm sick of movies that feeling like they have to explain the silliest elements of their world. Like when Mark Wahlberg walks out at the end and he's got the tash and he's wearing like kind of like the Sully outfit with the gun, everyone in the cinema was like, you know, great, that's Sully. Why can't we just have that the whole movie? Why is that so hard? I don't understand who it's pleasing, because if the fans, you know, case in point, Sonic. You know, no one wanted to see that Sonic movie when they were trying to pass him off as like a blue alien. But as soon as they made him one-to-one with the look of the games, all the fans, you know, felt like they were being paid credence to, and the movie was a hit. So I don't, and that was well before this movie. I don't know, that was 2 years ago. Like, who at Sony is not seeing the success of Sonic the Hedgehog and going, why the hell doesn't Mark Wahlberg have a tash? Get him a tash right now. And it seems like a small thing, but I just think it's just emblematic of the movie as a whole. Like, if you actually look at the costuming, sometimes Mark and Tom are just dressed like Mark and Tom. They're in like New Balance trainers and jeans and leather jackets, and they just don't feel anything like Nate or Sully. And then at the end, in other scenes, the costuming is perfect. Like Tom Holland's final outfit, when he puts on the bandolier and the theme starts playing, it looks exactly like Nathan Drake. Like Tom Holland playing Nathan Drake, shall I say. But that costume's 1-to-1. And at the end, he has the baseball shirt in the scene where Sully is finally unveiled as Sully. And you see the two of them standing together, pointing the guns and everything. I'm like, yes, finally! Well, I don't know why we had to wait till the third act of the movie / the post-credit scene to see Nate and Sully become Nate and Sully. Like, the whole joy of the Uncharted games is that 9 times out of 10, a new character that you meet is not someone that Nate is meeting for the first time. It's always, an old partner, an old flame. Like, the thing that breaks that whole rule, the exception that proves that rule, is Elena Fisher. She meets Nate in the first game, you get to kind of know Nate a little bit through her eyes, and then their relationship permeates throughout the entire series. And that's like a format break from something like Indiana Jones, which I thought was really nice. Like Nate, as much as he might appear like that woman in every port kind of guy, and they kind of touch on that a little bit with his past with Chloe in the second game, he's not really that guy. And I love the way Nate and Elena's relationship develops over the games. I think it's one of the sweetest romances in video games. And the fact that they're making an Uncharted movie without Elena Fisher at all, it's just insane to me. It's one of the best parts of the game. Which brings me to another point with this movie, is that it's so utterly sexless and devoid of any romantic tension. And maybe you could argue Chloe Fraser's the adaptation of Chloe Fraser in this movie is not meant to be a romantic foil to Tom Holland's Nathan, but I call bull on that because they like share a bed together and they kind of give each other these glances and they definitely play it like there's a bit of flirtation going on there, but it just has that whole MCU quality where like everyone looks beautiful but no one's having any sex and no one's having anything romantic or passionate to say to the other person. It's all about, the macro plot of the treasure and the adventure and the action. And I just think for something like Uncharted, in adapting it to the screen, the romantic side of it is really important. And the relationship that Nate and Elena have, if you're going to cut out Elena, fine. But at least give me a reason to care about the thought of Nate and Chloe getting together. And you can still do it in PG-13 adventure movies. Don't tell me you can't do it, because they were doing it for years. It's a recent thing that we've just utterly stripped out any kind of romantic tension in action-adventure movies. And it's just got to stop. Uncharted should have been the thing to buck that trend. Like, I should have been completely emotionally invested in a romance between Nate and Chloe, and it should have paid off. Instead, Chloe Fraser's okay. The actor who plays her does a good job, and she does seem, albeit a younger version of Chloe Fraser, she looks more accurate to the games than Nate and Sully do. But then, again, what I was saying earlier about like they pick out the wrong things from the games. In the games, sometimes you swap companions and one companion will go away for a little bit and another companion will come back. Like Sully in Uncharted 2, he's around for a little bit at the start in Borneo and then he completely fucks off, he comes back at the end. But in the meantime, you hang out with Elena or you hang out with Chloe, and they do that kind of structure in the film. Like he hangs around with Nate and Chloe for a bit. He hangs around with Sully and Chloe for a bit, and then he hangs around with just Chloe, and then he tricks Chloe, and then the whole third act is Sully and Nate. And then right at the end, we're paid a little bit of lip service to Chloe. She is in a boat on the river, and they just sort of wave to her, and she's like, "Huh, you bastards! You totally sent me the other way, careering off the. You totally sent me the wrong way, and I didn't get to be part of the finale at all. Imagine that!" It's just one of those things, like, it works in a video game to swap companions, but in a movie, like, there's no reason for Chloe to drop out of it in the way that she does. I like the idea that he tricks her, and he does it in quite a clever way, but that should have still paid off. Like, where's your Han Solo New Hope moment, where Chloe Fraser comes in to save the day in the finale when all hope is lost? That's something that should have happened. Or she should have been in the finale completely, from top to bottom. There's no excuse. The action overall in the film is pretty decent. Sometimes it gets a bit too shaky and a bit too close up with like the hand-to-hand stuff, but overall I think it's actually pretty well shot and edited. 9 times out of 10 I could tell what was going on, which is like, you know, low praise, but there's plenty of fist fights and chases, and the heist at the start's quite fun. There's a great gag with Nate where he like kicks a guy and completely falls on his arse.
$3 million.
And I think Tom Holland brings like a real likeable charm to this, you know, this alternate version of Nate, I guess, in those sequences. And he gets to use a bit of his acrobatics and gymnastics, which is really nice to see. I think the problem with all of the action in the movie is it's just a bit too CGI focused. And I know they're trying to recreate sequences from the games, like the whole plane sequence with the cargo, but it works in a game because the whole game world is rendered digital. In a movie, I'm just so bluntly aware of the fact that Nathan Drake's just pinging around on like against a green screen with some you know, practical cargo, yes, but everything else is fake. And I just think when the characters are not superheroes, it becomes really distracting when you have these CGI heavy set pieces, and you know, Black Widow and Nathan Drake do not need these abundantly special effects laden skydiving sequences. I want to see some more human, down-to-earth action. I don't need to see set pieces from the game translated one-to-one because I've already experienced it. I think, you know, in my original video, I compared a lot of the action I would want to see in an Uncharted movie to Casino Royale, and I still stand by that. Casino Royale's parkour chase is breathtaking, and so much of it is in the frame. And the final set piece in Venice, where the building collapses, I'm sorry, that's straight up evoking my memories of Uncharted 3, when the building's on fire and that's collapsing. It's the exact same thing. And Chris Cobbold and the team that created Casino Royale, they did that practically. That building really sinks. And whilst you're getting all this fun gunplay and action with Daniel Craig's Bond, the water's filling up and the environment feels like a part of the action, and there's a verticality to it, and climbing is involved in both those set pieces. Like, both those set pieces in Casino Royale are perfect ways to adapt Uncharted. And it's ironic that this whole movie only exists because allegedly Tom Holland pitched a James Bond movie, a young James Bond movie, to Sony, and instead they gave him Uncharted. And I feel like once you know that, it becomes so abundantly clear. But also, Tom, Casino Royale, where was that in the pitch, man? Like, just take those sequences and just do your own spin on that. And then with Uncharted, that would be great in a movie.
It's the biggest treasure that's never been found.
Oh, crap!
Uncharted 2022 should have taken the romance, the empathy from the games, and, you know, cast age-appropriate actors. And then it should have created action set pieces that are inherently filmic. Not things that, like, look like the games but feel like they are a video game, but things that feel like a film. The final set piece is quite CGI heavy in the sense that they're lifting out two pirate ships on helicopters, and Sully's piloting one of them, the bad guys are piloting another, and they're crashing into each other and trying to get away, and you know, obviously you can only do that in CGI, but I think that sequence plays a hell of a lot better than the plane sequence, because, well, anytime we're on the ships or in the helicopter, it's practical. So when we're watching Tom Holland fight people on the ship, even when it's suspended in the air, we're looking at something real with kind of like a CGI background, or it's like a real shot, everything's practical. Cut to, shot of the exterior of the ship, that's all CGI. Cut back to practical. Someone who does that really, really well, even in his terrible movies, is Paul W.S. Anderson. In Alien vs Predator, in 2002 Resident Evil, he's constantly cutting back between practical creatures, practical effects, and CGI effects, and he does that brilliantly. So ironically, that's something that Uncharted 2022 could have taken from Resident Evil 2002, a better mixture of practical and CGI. The finale has that kind of Pirates of the Caribbean feeling to it as well, where like something kind of ridiculous has happened, and that notion gets taken to its logical extreme, and it gets even more ridiculous, and our heroes are kind of caught in the middle of it, and that makes it fun. And also, it kind of feels unexpected. It's not really anything we've really seen in the games. So I thought that was a great finale, actually. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed a lot of the movie. I just didn't love it, and I was constantly thinking, you know, like, when I was a kid, if this had been what had come out, I would have been fuming. I would have been absolutely fuming. I would have been so fucking disappointed. Because it's not really anything like the games. But I'm trying to take it from a kind of neutral, as a movie perspective. In which case, I think it's fine. And, you know, if you're in any way interested in seeing this movie, go and see it. Because the theatres really need your money right now. And I think you'll have a fun time. And I don't want it to bomb. I would hope that it makes enough to get a sequel. I think Ruben Fleischer did a decent job. It's probably his best film since Zombieland. He often confuses me with Sean Levy because he is adept at creating just fine blockbuster movies that end up doing surprisingly well at the box office, and in turn he keeps getting to make them. I didn't really like Venom or Zombieland 2 very much, but a lot of people like Venom, and it did really well. And so he's definitely, you know, Sony definitely wanted him to replicate that Venom success here. It seems like he's more or less done it. The reviews seem, you know, mixed to good. The opening weekend, although it's not open in America yet, it seems pretty good. So yeah, hopefully we do get a sequel, but I would love to see someone a bit more in touch with the games, or what makes the games tick rather than what could be brought over from the games, for an Uncharted sequel. Also, this movie, it just uses Uncharted lore in such a weird way that I feel like it's kind of winking at the fans sometimes, but then I don't see who it's for. Like, the bar that Nate works at is called Kitty Got Wet. It's like, why would you give me this obscure fucking reference to something that Nolan North improv'd front and centre, compared to just like casting an accurate Nathan Drake? The movie's kind of a mixture between Uncharted 3 and 4, but then Chloe Fraser has a big role, like in 2, but then the post-credit scene kind of sets up the events of Uncharted 1, and we get sort of like a cipher for Eddie Raja, we get the golden gun. It's quite funny actually that we get not Nadine Ross and we get not Eddie Raja in this film. And I don't see why that is. Like, why not just do Nadine Ross and Eddie Raja?
You are a collector.
Well, I dabble.
I don't dabble. My family has been looking for this fortune for a very long time. So much blood.
Antonio Banderas rounds out the cast with a somewhat fun villain. I think if I'd have heard Antonio Banderas was cast as the villain in Uncharted before I heard any of the other casting announcements, I would have thought it was going to be the best fucking movie ever. But unfortunately, here we are. But yeah, I think I at least appreciate that the movie tries to flesh out his motivations a little bit more. I like the tension he has with his dad. I like the idea that he wants to hold on to his family's wealth and he feels like he's honouring them by finding this gold and by keeping the family wealth going. I think it's an interesting motivation for a villain. And I think it's also interesting when, you know, final chance for spoilers, not Nadine Ross murders him. But it does that Iron Man 3 thing of, you know, if you're going to do the villain behind the villain, then that's fine. I'm on board with that. I think it can be interesting. But the villain behind the villain needs to be more interesting than the cipher. You can't have an interesting villain like Ben Kingsley's Mandarin, or to a lesser extent Antonio Banderas in this movie, and then kill them off in a shocking twist, or replace them in a shocking twist, rather, with Iron Man 3, and then replace them with not Nadine Ross and Aldrich Killian. I'm going to own the war on terror somehow. I'm going to play both sides. Why, Aldrich? Why? I was expecting the movie not to use guns an awful lot, and I was found completely right when I went to see it, and I find that really disappointing because, like, most of the action in Uncharted is gunplay, and I think you could definitely get away with some fun shootouts that still feel PG-13. I think the whole decision to just sort of like shy away from Nate ever holding a gun, apart from really at the very end, is weird and unnecessary. Just let him cook some fools. It's what we all want to see. In the third act, Tom Holland looks like Nathan Drake. He's wearing his clothes, but he's just playing Tom Holland's own version of a treasure hunter, which is fun, if not accurate. But Mark Wahlberg is dressed like Nathan Drake, and he's supposed to be playing Sully. And it's just so frustrating and weird that Tom Holland really did bounce from a multiversal Spider-Man movie to a multiversal Nathan Drake movie just 2 months later. Because that's what it looks like. It looks like I'm watching young Nathan Drake and adult Nathan Drake. That's what it looks like. And it's weird. And I don't understand why we couldn't have had a movie that had some inventive, original action, some romance, and Sully with a big, thick, goddamn tash. Why was that so hard? And what frustrates me is that Uncharted 2, I bet, will open with some contrived reason why he shaved it off again, and it'll be in that movie for another 10 minutes. If Marky Mark wants to continue with the funky Uncharted bunch, then he needs to keep that thing glued to his face. No exceptions. Who would I like to direct the next Uncharted movie? Well, Joe Carnahan was attached for a little while, and I think he's a pretty cool action director, so I'd love to see him return to that. I think my pipe dream wish list, the top of that list would probably be someone like Steven Soderbergh, because he's made some fucking fantastic action films like Haywire. Where he's proven that he can frame up action brilliantly, keep everything in the frame with actors who know what they're doing, and it's cut together so well. And then he can also obviously do the super cool, stylish heist movie. So I think, you know, if you combined the sensibilities of Ocean's 11 with Haywire, that would be a bomb Uncharted movie. But he's never going to do it. He's way too good for Uncharted, unfortunately. Hey, you know what? I don't want to see the Russos return to make Secret Wars. I'm done with them doing Marvel things. Maybe they could work with Tom Holland on this, because they're pretty good action directors, and I think some of the work they've done before would play into Uncharted really nicely. But yeah, so that was my thoughts on Uncharted. As a huge fan of the games, a game series that transported me to all these incredible worlds for so many years. I was obsessed with Uncharted. I really was. It's an obsession that obviously, you know, I started Full Fat Videos like January 2018. The last Uncharted game came out, 2016? I think Lost Legacy was 2017, maybe. So, you know, like, that kind of ship had already sailed by the time I started doing this channel. I know I did the Uncharted 2 video, but, like, yeah, I don't think it's really ever been apparent to my viewers how much I care about these games, and how, you know, in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to make an Uncharted movie. And I never would have guessed that it would look or sound anything like this. But if you were to ask me, would I watch another one of these movies? Yes, I would. But they've got one more chance to make something great. They've earned some of my goodwill with this one. But the next one needs to blow it out of the water. A big thank you to my full fat tier patron, Dr. Chike. If you'd like to donate money to my Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/fullfatvideos. If you'd like to find me on Instagram, you can find me at full_fat_videos. And if you'd like to find me on Twitter, you can find me at, you guessed it, at fullfatvideos.